to Teaching Through the Bible. Today we're going to continue our conversation about a very difficult topic, something that is a real sticking point for a number of people as they read through the Old Testament, very confusing. We see when a man sells his daughter as a servant. Now, what's not necessarily clear here, what may not seem clear at first, is this is with the idea is that she is going to be married either to the guy that she was initially the servant for, or to his son. So maybe it's a younger woman, and he's like, I want my son to marry this woman, and so she's going to be sold, in a sense, to marry the son. Now, that, in today's culture, sounds like, what on earth, right? Because that's not how we do marriage, at least not in America. But keep in mind, in this culture back then, arranged marriages were very normal. Arranged marriages was pretty much how it happened. And so, how different is this from an arranged marriage, right? An arranged marriage, you would have the one who's going to marry this woman is supposed to pay what's called a bride price. In fact, we see later on when King Saul tells David, who becomes King David later, hey, you can marry one of my daughters here. He says, oh, I can't, because I can't pay the bride price. I don't have enough money. I'm a poor guy, and she is a princess, so I don't have the money to pay to be able to marry her. And so this is not necessarily all that different when it comes to how their culture did marriages, how they did, even think about how we do weddings. A lot of times, I've got daughters. I'm going to have to pay for the wedding, right? Then a lot of times, traditionally, that whoever they marry, that guy, his parents will have to pay for, some of the other things. There's money involved in this, but when we, think of it that way, it doesn't sound so awkward and so bad and so weird and different. But here, there's money involved as well. But in this case, this is helpful for that family who's, poor, trying to get out of debt, whatever it is. And it seems a little bit more icky in that situation, but there's a lot of protection for this woman. Because so they've got this arranged marriage, essentially, and that's what's going on here. And it even specifies you don't treat her as a normal servant. You don't treat her like, going out and doing this other kind of like work that the other people are doing. In verse 7, she shall not go out as the male servants do. So she's not going out and doing hard labor or something. She is designated as someone who's, basically engaged to either the guy who is giving the money to this other family, to her family, or to that guy's son. And in fact, when she's married to that guy's son, it says treat her as a daughter. So she's not even, she doesn't keep servant status. If she's a daughter, she's not the servant. So it's a temporary thing that ends with her being a wife. Now, here, certainly does not condone having multiple wives, but it says if you end up getting another wife, you better not treat her any less. So maybe thinking here of with Jacob marrying two women, and he definitely treated Rachel with preferential treatment rather than Leah. And so here they're saying, hey, you can't do that. If you don't continue to provide for her, then guess what? She's free. She's good to go. You can't, you are not able to say, you know what, I don't really want her anymore, so I'm going to kick her to the curb. You're not allowed to do that. There's a lot of protection for her that, all right, well, if you've said you're going to marry her, that's what you're going to do, and that's how it's going to be. And you can't just say, oh, well, I kind of like, she was kind of the servant at one point, and so now I can just sell her to someone else. Nope, can't do that. You just lose out, and she's free, and can go back to her family, marry someone else, whatever that may be. She goes free, no payment. No one has to pay to like get her freedom or anything like that. You've done the wrong thing by neglecting her, and you lose out. And then Lastly, we have this other sections in verse 20 and verse 26. So we have this thing about striking a servant with a rod, and we see here striking a servant, and so this could be assault, or it could not be, depending on what exactly is going on. So here you have something that's very clear. You can't just do whatever you want with your servant, because basically it's the eye for an eye kind of principle. Like if you kill your servant, it says he shall be avenged. That means you're dead. All right? Because a servant is still a human being. And what is the command? We saw this back in Genesis 9, life for life, right? So if you kill someone, then you forfeit your life. And so if you abuse your servant, if you, this person in lower social status from you, if you abuse them, unlike other ancient law codes, you don't get to say, well, I own them. It's mine, so I can do what I want. No, God says, no, this person is a human being made in my image, and you killed them, and so you will die. Or it says, if you strike them and, screw up their eye, you mess that up, or you knock out their tooth, just knock the tooth out, right? Which, all things considered, would have been smaller, it's a little bit smaller of an injury than a lot of other things that could happen. But you just knock their tooth out, boom, they're free. Yeah, contract is null and void. You don't have that person under your care anymore. Because remember, what did we say? The point of thinking of how we're supposed to rule is we are managers that are taking care of what God's given us, but everything belongs to God. So if you are not taking care of what God has given you to take care of well, if you are not treating this person well, then guess what? You don't get that. You don't get that responsibility anymore. You don't get to take care of this person anymore because you are obviously not doing your job as you're supposed to. And yet we do see that if you strike the servant with a rod and they survive, I think when it says survive a day or two, it's just saying they didn't die from it. They're fine. Obviously, if you strike them and knock out a tooth or something, and it says later, well then that you're abusing them. You lose out on having that person work for you. But if they're fine, essentially 21 I think says, but if they're fine, then it's okay to have struck them with a rod. And I think it's important that it says with a rod. That this was a tool of discipline. And it's much less common now, but when I was growing up, very common for parents to spank their kids. Maybe, spank your kid with the wooden spoon or something like that. And most people understood, okay, well, this is a form of discipline. This is not to harm them. This is not long-term damage. If you did actually really legitimately harm your kids, if you, got to a certain point, then you would have, human services would show up and say, hey, we can see that this is really detrimental to your child. This is really harmful to your child, and we're going to take your child away because you are abusing your child. But if it's just a regular spank on the fanny and, hey, you're not supposed to do that, little spank on the fanny, that's everyone kind of understood. Okay, well, yeah, that's part of just physical discipline. That's what happens. Now, a lot of people disagree on that now, but that is not too far from that's the same kind of category as what we saw in verse 20 here, that where you are having physical discipline and there's these limits. If you get to a point of you're abusing them, then they're taken away from you. So we're not used to thinking that so much with adults, disciplining other adults, but it's not really all that different from what used to be pretty common in our own culture like 20, 30 years ago. So sometimes it can be helpful to see, to really be thinking about how actually similar some of these things might be to other things that we do in our own culture. It might make it seem less icky or uncomfortable. But even if it doesn't, even if it seems, okay, I still am not really comfortable with this, then what we got to do is say, all right, is this okay then? Is God okay with this? Do I have to be okay with this? There's a couple different ways to handle that, and we'll talk about that at the beginning of the next video, about how we address that, and what kind of our two basic options are. So we will begin that next lesson, and I'll see you then. Thank you for watching that video. I hope that it helped you learn a little bit more about the Bible today. And if you'd like to continue to learn more about the Bible, then we have plenty of other videos on the channel. And if this has been helpful for you, then you can always let me know by subscribing to the channel. And hopefully I'll be able to continue to help you learn even more about God's Word. Thanks.